And introduce yourself. Let us know where you're joining from, what brought you to this particular webinar today. We're curious if there's any specific questions or concerns that you're facing around supporting girls and women in STEM in your own work. My name is Amanda Sullivan. I'm senior researcher at the National Girls Collaborative Project, and I'm really thrilled to introduce you in just a couple of minutes to our wonderful group of panelists who are all part of NGCP's board of directors. But we have just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started and introduce you to all of them. This webinar is being recorded. We ask that you stay muted while our panelists are speaking and presenting, but there will be lots of time for audience question. We have time set aside at the end of our webinar today, and we're also encouraging you to put in your questions, your comments, and your thoughts throughout the presentation while our panelists are speaking, and we will try our best to address as many questions as we can. If this is your first time joining us for a National Girls Collaborative Project event, I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome. I'm just so thrilled that you decided to spend your Women's History Month with NGCP. And let me share just a couple of notes about who we are and what we do before we get started. NGCP is a nonprofit organization with the vision of creating, supporting STEM experiences that are as diverse as the world we live in. And at the end of today's webinar, you'll get to hear from our founder and CEO, Karen Peterson, with a few more words about NGCP and the work that we do to support all of you and girls and women in STEM. You'll also see her, I'm sure, in the chat all throughout today. We create a lot of different resources to help our networks grow and thrive. We have regular national webinars like this one. We have one coming up next week you might want to check out. We have a monthly newsletter where we share our updated statistics, events, resources, things like that. And all of this and more can be found on our website. But I don't want to take any more time away from this important conversation because I know that's why we're all here today. I can already see in the chat folks introducing themselves. They're coming from all across the US, and I know that you have a lot of questions for our panelists today. As I mentioned, all of our panelists today are from NGCP's board of directors, and we're just so thrilled that I'm grateful that you're devoting your time to guiding this important conversation for us today. Our panel moderator is the amazing Dr. Gabriela González. She's our current NGCP board chair, founder and CEO of Shihadah Tech Connect, and the former director of Intel's STEM Education Research Office. Gabby, thank you so much for helping us have this important and maybe difficult conversation around the current landscape, people's worries and concerns about supporting girls and women in STEM. We're grateful for your leadership on this conversation and all of the work that our board does for NGCP. So let me turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Amanda. And thank you, every one of you who has made the decision and made the time to join us this morning or this afternoon, wherever you may be. As Amanda mentioned, I am blessed and very honored to be the chair of NGCP for this year. And I want to make sure that we make the most out of this time that we have together. And we want to make sure also that you find this time was a good investment of your your participation. So as Amanda mentioned, we're currently experiencing tremendous headwinds across federal, state, and perhaps even local policy and institutional impacts from the current administration and all of the things that are happening. You know, we're waking up every day wondering what's next. Excuse me. So we want to acknowledge that we all may feel anxious. That's real, as Amanda mentioned, maybe concerned, and perhaps a bit fearful. I think that's a valid word in this environment for what may come next. Our projects, our programs, and even the mere survival of many organizations supporting girls and women right now are being challenged and really put to the test, I think. However, having said that, I'd like for us to keep in mind that this is not new. We've been here before. Perhaps this time feels even more daunting, but I really strongly believe that we will persevere and we will grow stronger together. So the goal for today's panel is to really engage and provide assistance and share resources so we can thrive to achieve our collective impact. With that being said, I'm going to throw my website information in case you want to learn more about either my background or about the work that I'm doing, rather than taking time away from the more valid questions and conversation. So please participate in the conversation. This webinar is for you. So having said that, let's get going and let's get started by introducing our panel. So each panelist will take a few minutes to introduce themselves, and we will kick that off with Siobahn.
Thank you so much. I am honored to be here as we're celebrating Women's History Month, and I am so honored to be a board member for NGCP. I am a faculty member at North Carolina Central University, and also I lead our AI Institute on our campus. Why did I join NGCP? Well, once was a girl, now a woman, and I'm someone in STEM. I have been a computer scientist my whole life, even from the time that I was a girl, when I first learned how to code and build my own websites. This organization and the power that it has and the impact that it has had over the years is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And so I'm very excited to be here to hopefully bring some calm to the conversation and what's happening out there in the world. So thank you all for having this panel. And I will now turn it over to my next colleague.
Hi, I think I go next.
Anita, you want to go next?
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Anita Krishnamurthi, and I work at an organization called the After School Alliance. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we advocate on behalf of youth, parents, and programs all across the country to try and make sure that every community has high quality after school programs for every child and family that would like to participate. And I am the Senior VP for STEM and Youth Engagement there, and I oversee our national level STEM initiatives. So I've been associated with the National Girls Collaborative Project for a long time, actually ever since I started at the After School Alliance way back in 2010. And I've been on the board now for a little over 4 years. And I volunteer my time to serve on the board of NGCP for a few different reasons. The first one is, like Siobahn, I'm a female scientist. My background is in astrophysics. And I'm personally very keenly aware of the underrepresentation of women in the physical sciences, especially. I also just think that astronomy and the physical sciences and physics are really fun fields, and they're really important fields that touch on and solve so many problems in the world. And I'd really love for more women and girls to both experience that fun and contribute to it. The problems that physics has solved and continues to solve requires a really diverse set of people to contribute to the field. People think of biology as helping people, which it does. But, if you think about X-rays and MRIs and LASIK, all of that comes from an understanding and application of physics. And as do tools we can't live without today, like GPS and the internet and efficient batteries and other technologies, right? So physics also helps people. That's the message I want to get across. And last, but perhaps the main reason really is, Siobahn said when she introduced herself, is because I'm a woman. I was raised by a ferociously independent single mother who was a huge champion for me to do whatever I set my mind to do. So I really want to pay that forward. And I have this very deep empathy and sense of solidarity with women everywhere in my DNA. And I want to do my part to remove all the barriers that we all encounter as women. The problems are not limited to STEM, but that is where my expertise is. So that's the barrier that I can contribute to tackling. And I'm really privileged to be able to contribute to NGCP's mission in this way.
Thank you, Anita. We really appreciate you being here. And Shihadah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shihadah Saleem. I'm the Director of Youth Programs and Pathways at the New York Hall of Science in Queens, New York. And I've known about the National Girls Collaborative Project since 2014, when I started my journey at the Intrepid Museum, and have been a board member for, I believe, 2 years or so. And a couple of reasons why I think it's so important to be part of this board is one, because I too, like my colleagues, my fellow panelists, am a woman in STEM and STEAM, a Black woman to be specific. And I was really, really intrigued by marine science. And at the time, I didn't really see very many Black people, Black women in the sciences, at least in my perspectives. And then secondly, to really inspire and help all girls and all women understand you don't have to give up any other part of yourself to be in STEM and STEAM. You could still be a cosmetologist and still learn or love fashion and design. You could be a physicist and still learn and love marine science. So all the things that make us us is still celebrated and necessary in the diverse world of science, technology, engineering, and math. Thank you, Gabby. Back to you.
Thank you, Shihadah. And with that, let's get kicked off on our questions. However, let me remind everyone that we would really like to have you ask your questions. And so we will try to go back and forth. I'll be moderating depending on what questions we get in the chat, and then combine that with our prepared questions. So to get us started, Anita, we know that people are worried about cuts to their programming. I mean, that's happening. What have you heard about impacts to those kinds of programs, and can you share some examples?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Gabby. And as you said at the beginning, we're living through a lot of uncertainty right now, and there's some very real impacts that we've already started to hear about. So, and some of them are not, what you'd immediately think of as STEM-related programs or STEM-related issues, right? Like, so some of the issues around immigration, for example, mean that parents are keeping children home from school and after-school programs. So people are trying to figure out how to continue offering services to some of the young people who are harder to reach now. But the programs are also concerned that the smaller numbers may impact their own reporting on outcomes and impacts of their programs. The executive order in DEI has caused a lot of concern, and race-based programs are either sort of bracing for cuts or already losing grants and partners. Programs that touch on the environment and climate are another set of programs that are quite badly affected. So it's all very real. And I guess my request to all the participants is really for you to tell us about the impacts that you're experiencing in whatever way you feel comfortable, because as advocates, we need to be able to hear and tell the real stories of what's happening to funders and policymakers as we look to see what the solutions might be, because I think the thing that we all want to do is to be true to the values that we hold dear, and to ensure that the resources can continue to reach the people who need it the most, and figure out how to frame it in ways that seem just and fair to everybody.
Yeah, that's very true, Anita. Thank you for sharing your insight on that. Again, I think we all are working together to figure out, how do we pivot? How do we adjust and reframe things so that we can continue to be successful in this landscape? So Siobahn, same question. What have you heard about impacts to programming, and can you share any examples?
Absolutely. So I'm in North Carolina, and my university is governed by something called the UNC system. There is a policy in place that touches on DEI. And so I think that's happening across the world. So there are language that has to be adjusted and adapted so that it's more equal for everyone. So what I would say is I have personally not experienced any financial barriers happening with my grants or funding, but there has been some for some individuals. What I want to say to just keep us upbeat is while there are many restrictions that are being placed on us as far as language and wording, I think we all know that the work and the passion that we have remains the same. That's something that cannot be changed. And so as long as we're doing work that is impactful and helping people, perhaps we have to make adjustments to our language, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we stop everything that we're doing. I think that we've all been helping everyone. Just because this focus here is girls, right, for NGCP doesn't mean that I don't impact young men that are out there. So what I would challenge us all to do is to remember who we are. The work that we're doing changes lives. And there are so many people that we touch that we don't even know about. So perhaps in this time, we're learning new ways of restating what we do. And so that's just the way that I'm choosing to look at it rather than getting too down and out. Because Gabby, to your point, this is not new. It's not new. And so we just try to meet the challenges that we can. And I think as long as we keep working together and we keep that community building that we have together to learn from each other, I think that we'll weather the storm.
Thank you, Siobahn. Shihadah, given some of the impacts already mentioned, what are some ways we can continue to engage girls and women in STEM going forward?
It's a great question. Thank you, Gabby. And I might be able to touch on some of the questions that are in the chat as well for my answer. I would say to have full transparency in your capacity of the work that you do with your team and with your community. Make sure that they understand that you're still here with them in the trenches. Include youth voice, like Anita's wonderful CES program, who includes youth voice in everything that they do. And just like Siobahn was also sharing, make sure it's a collective impact. Grab all your friends, your colleagues, everyone who knows how to do this work in a collective way to engage them in celebrations, programs, find ways to pivot. There was a question in the chat about pushback for facilitating programs just for women and girls. I would say use some of the NGCP stats, facts you can't argue with, right? Use those stats to say, we need to have these particular programs just for women and girls because, and then say it's not closed to anybody else, but this is what our focus is. This is who we're uplifting. And if you want to bring other gender identifying students or community members in the event, that's great. We need allyship, we need camaraderie. But this particular program, we want to focus on girls and women in STEAM and STEM. I would also continue to give girls and women platforms to share their experiences, to showcase the work that they've been and continue to do. For example, highlighting science fairs. Keep going with those STEM career expos. I have one in May in which we're highlighting all students in STEM and STEAM, but you can have pieces that are also contributing and celebrating girls and women in the field. Also make it a year-round celebration, not just for Women's Month. If you want folks to feel like you're celebrating not just in one particular gender or time of year, start to include a lot of those accomplishments and celebrations every month for the full year, so that people continue to be comfortable with the conversation and it just becomes a daily routine within your organization or in your classroom. So those are the types of ways or some suggestions by which to continue celebrating and supporting girls and women in STEAM. Thanks, Gabby.
Thank you for sharing. Amanda, I know there's been a flurry of questions on the chat. Do you want to help us maybe post one of them for our panel?
Yes, there have been a flurry of questions. I'm going to start with, this might not be in the right order, but I'm keeping track of all of them, I promise. Trisha had a question about How can you meaningfully hire and encourage others to come into these spaces as employees when there's so much uncertainty when it comes to funding, viability, sustainability? She's commenting that it doesn't seem responsible to hire in this environment. She has an open position, but she's hesitant to post the job. So do any of you on the panel have thoughts about that?
I'm happy to start. This is Anita, and I'd say that I hear you. So transparency, I think, is the key thing, right? Like, I think that everybody is aware of sort of the issues we're all facing. And I think that if you can be open and say, these are the terms and conditions of this offer, and I understand if this sounds too risky for you. And as long as a person knows what they are walking into, I think it's entirely fair to conduct a job search and offer a job, right? Because as Gabby was saying, I think there are a lot of people out there who want to be a part of the solution, and your job might be to them offer that sense of purpose and being part of solving a problem that they're seeing, however long that lasts, right? Like, I mean, I think that's true of everybody here. We just don't know what's going to happen around the corner. I mean, it could be a job cut, it could be a health issue, who knows, right? Like, life happens. And I think that just being open and transparent with any job candidate would be my advice. The others might have other thoughts on this. I think you're muted, Gabby.
Yes, I was. I try not to. So I was just going to see Siobahn or Shihadah had anything else to add. If not, we can move on to the next question. Okay. Amanda, go ahead. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Shihadah.
Gabby. I would agree wholeheartedly with Anita, but also think strategically about how this person can support, either uphold or help to challenge the values and missions of your institution or your team. If you feel like this particular position is highly needed right now, and in what way, to be very strategic on your job announcement on how that position can elevate the team or the institution, and in what ways you need that person. For example, we're somewhat in the same bucket, Trisha, and so understanding that, for example, at my institution, this position is in person. This might have blended hours in terms of virtual capability, but right now it's in person. These are the hours, and these are the high level roles and responsibilities you have, and make that however many times you have an interview opportunity, whether it's 2 interviews, 1 virtual, 1 in person, to keep saying those things. Because for some reason, once you get down to, okay, we're ready for that offer letter, there seems to be something that the person is like, oh, I didn't know this. So please, again, make sure that it is, this person can continue to be an asset for you and vice versa. That professional development I'm learning is, at this moment, one of the top decision-making reasons people are wanting to be in an institution or not. So also look at some of the benefits that might outweigh either costs, pay, or might outweigh whether it's in person or virtual or blended.
Thank you, Shihadah. Amanda, do we have another question from the audience that we can tackle before?
Yes, we do. Earlier on, our first question that came in was from Sarah Kopilka. She wanted to know, and I think a lot of us can relate to this as funding is starting to seem scarce and more competitive. How do we keep ourselves from having a scarcity mindset and feeling hyper competitive about opportunities and funding? And she also mentioned that she is a freelancer. So what role can freelancers like her play in this current environment?
Siobahn, any thoughts on that, or?
No, if you come back to me on that. I don't have anything for that.
Okay. Anita or Shihadah?
Quickly that came to mind as a freelancer, if you have a professional social media account like LinkedIn, use that to your advantage. If there are people or organizations you would like to work for or get in touch with, start doing that now. Reaching out to institutions if they have panel opportunities, if they have, whether it's virtual or in person, if they have events and programs that you would love to either speak with youth or professionals about. I think that would be one way to go about getting yourself out there to market yourself and have the availability and use social media as a way to get yourself into spaces. And in regards to scarcity and funding, I think a lot of us, at least nonprofits, we're continuing to hold collective impact meetings and opportunities for us to get on grants together in different ways to increase the level of visibility, impact, and funding. So I know that's one thing that we collectively are continuing to hold dear, is how can we continue to work together as a collaborative group, just like NGCP, to increase impact and to increase our own professional networks too.
Yeah, and I'll just second that, right? Like, I think more collaboration rather than competition is going to be the way forward. And I know, and we all know that at the end of the day, young people and communities are better served when programs work together rather and offer something bigger than lots of small piecemeal programs. And the other thing too, I'd say, Sarah, is as a freelancer, right? Like, look to see what the opportunities are to offer that kind of collaborative proposal writing, right? Like, if you can do research on where the grant opportunities might be and serve as someone who could help put some of these grants and proposals together, everybody is strapped for time. And I think that if there's a way that you can write yourself into proposals as a part of then helping bring these proposals, making these grants happen, that's one idea for you. But happy to keep talking. I know it's not, it's easy for me to say. It's a lot of work for you, but that's one idea.
Thank you, Anita. And just to add that to that is network. Continue to reach out, to meet new people, to find those opportunities for collaboration, because, you know, post-COVID, it seemed really hard, and it may be at times still hard to reach out, to be out there, you know, to attend events or to meet people. But that's the only way I think that you will find some opportunities, is by putting yourself out there and meeting as many people as you can that are working in similar projects or that do similar work, because that's how then maybe they think of you when there's opportunities. So with that said, Amanda, let's go to the audience for another question if there is one.
Yes, there is. So this one is right on the topic of girls in STEM and the topic of our webinar. Ashley asks, how do you respond to parents or community members who express concerns about programs that specifically support girls exploring STEM careers? And then she provides context. In Idaho, there has been a lot of pushback on female-specific programs. A lot of organizations have just decided to drop that element and make them elements for all rather than specifically women and girls. She says she'd like to avoid that, but would love advice on how to handle that pushback. And I think some people have already started chiming in the chat, but curious about what any of our board members can share on that.
Any of our panelists have any thoughts on this?
It's a complicated one, but I'll try. And I know Shihadah will have thoughts as well, since she runs some wonderful girl serving programs. You know, I mean, I do think, right? Like, I think it's something we've been saying at the beginning about hold on to the values that drive you to do this work so that you can stay focused on the end goal that you want to achieve. And if you design intentionally and thoughtfully in a way that supports women and girls, but it is open to all, you will still achieve that goal of ensuring the needs of the women and girls in the communities you want to serve are met. And so I would suggest that you look at your design very carefully and make sure that it is girl friendly, right? And I'm sure there are boys out there who would like that too, right? Like that is just the way it always is. When you design for a particular community, it's not only that community that benefits. We've seen that time and again in a lot of different settings. And so that's one way to get around it if you are facing that particular challenge. And Shihadah, I don't know if you have anything else that you'd like to add.
I would agree, Anita. And if again, language is tough, I know this is coming up a lot of different ways in the chat. If language is tough and it's clashing, people are just clashing all together. Some of the ways you may be able to combat that is using images and videos that showcase your target audience. And this might also be a way to visually engage folks into understanding how this event or space will welcome people. So that's another way to combat is using images and video if your language might be under fire.
Yeah, and just building on that, one last thought, right? It's invite people in to see your programs. I mean, we are an advocacy group at the After School Alliance. So I'm always all about advocacy, and so it's when people see what it is you're actually doing for the young people in your community, it's hard for them to be against it.
Yeah.
It's the theoretical concept of it that can get in the way. So invite people in, invite your parents in, invite your media and your local policymakers in when the program is in session and have them talk to the young people and see exactly what's going on. And then see sort of, if that resistance is still there, and then you can try what I suggested earlier of just making sure you're designing to the audience that you want to make sure gets served without leaving anybody out.
Yeah, and just to add to what you said, Anita, is family-friendly events, because that includes everyone. Bring your parents to STEM Day, kind of flip the script a little bit there. Could be, bring your friends or whatever, to try to get away from that connotation if it's only serving a few. Although interestingly enough, women comprise in some cases more than 50% of this country. So I still I'm having a hard time in all transparency trying to figure out how this is not for the majority of the people we serve. But again, think about maybe making it family friendly so it includes everyone, and with the encouragement to bring in more girls on. This is a family event, bring cousins, bring brothers, sisters, nephews, nieces, etc. So that's another thought there. Amanda, any other questions from the audience?
There's one more question that kind of gets into some of this dialogue that we're already having, and it's another question about do I or don't I adjust language? So let me just give you the context of this question in the chat. Claudia, who's the PI of Step Up, a national community of physics teachers. Step Up provides high school physics lessons to empower teachers, create cultural change, and inspire young women to pursue physics in college. As a program, they've decided to change some language on their website, but there's disagreement on what to do about one of our lessons in particular. Some teachers want to resist, while others feel they may not be able to actually teach the lessons in their district as it currently stands. She says, to me, it makes sense to adjust language while keeping our core mission and values in order to continue doing the work. But there's a struggle to balance what teachers want and what other members of the team want. Do you have any advice? So I think this is probably advice that lots of people in the audience might want and need. So is there anything else that you all can share about whether or not to adjust language and how to make those decisions?
I can start here. because I was talking about the language earlier and I saw Trisha's comment. Because I'm a professor, again, I'm governed by a body. So I do have to change my language. It's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't think personally that the language, you changing it, is going to change the core of what you're doing. And it sounds like you already know that. So I don't see that as something that's going to prohibit the work that you're already doing. But when it comes to working together, for those who don't want and those who do, I think this is where we have to get creative and come together to figure out what's the best pathway forward. And even though a lot of this feels very daunting and negative, to me, this gives us new ways to reimagine the work that we're already doing. So perhaps in bringing both the do's and the don'ts together, there can be a new way to teach that curriculum that you have in place. And that way you can get everyone's buy-in. So perhaps even though it's a challenge, this is just a new way of doing what you already are doing. That's the way that I would look at it. Just bring everybody together and just have the conversation. Okay, I understand no one wants to be here. None of us wants to do this, but here we are. How can we make this work for everyone? And you might even come up with something even better than you already had, to be honest with you.
Thank you, Siobahn. Shihadah or Anita, anything else to add?
No, I think Siobahn said it all.
I agree. I think, thank you, Siobahn, for, and again, you know, we're not going to solve every problem or every challenge in a 1 hour panel, definitely. So we, you know, again, you know, 40 minutes is such a short amount of time to really have deeper conversation and more meaningful interactions. So if you like to, you know, or be interested in a follow-up session where we continue to have this conversation, excuse me, part 2 maybe, please add to the chat if you'd be interested in having a follow-up to this conversation so that we can continue to have discussion, share resources, share help, maybe bring in some new panelists that can really help answer questions that you may have. I really am glad to see also that in the chat, you know, somebody who's needing help and somebody who has a way to help are having those interactions. I think that's wonderful. That's just terrific. And so I want us to continue to do that. So let me just ask one last question, and if we can just make it a minute answer, if you can, you know, just your thoughts on it. Siobahn, what is one strategy that people can do or an action they can take after this webinar?
I really appreciate that. And I was going to ask you a question too. And this is for NGCP for us to think about, is how we can help facilitate this conversation for our attendees. I don't know if we have a LinkedIn group that we can add folks to, but I think that would be great. But the question that you asked, I think this is an opportunity where we need to come together now more than ever. So what I see in the chat, I see a lot of people who are very passionate about the work that they do and are going back and forth. That's what we're all going to have to do to figure this out. None of us has any of the answers. Like I said, we're going to have to huddle up, continue to have this dialogue and figure out the pathway forward. We have to reimagine a new future in the way that we want it to be given our current circumstance. While that is not something that was asked for, what do we do as people in STEM? We solve very complex problems, and this is just one of those. And that's the way that I'm choosing to view it. So I just say, let's keep working together, keep building this community that we have that is amazing, and work through this. And when we come out on the other side, if we want to go back to everything that we had before, we can do that. But something tells me we're going to reimagine something else. And so let's just look at this as the next evolution of the next best thing that we're going to do. And I really believe that. So let's keep working together. That's what I believe is going to help us get through this challenging time.
Thank you, Siobahn. Shihadah, same question.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Gabby?
Yeah, just what is a strategy that people can do or action after this webinar?
I think a strategy is to continue to have those, if you work with a team of people on a regular basis and you haven't had, you don't facilitate team weekly meetings, If you can, I would highly suggest you start team weekly meetings, just so that you can get all of those frustrations, thoughts, ideas out there with the collective group of people you already work with, and you can devise plans much quickly or easier. Then you can roll them up to leadership if leadership is asking those questions of how are we going to do this? When are we going to do that? You will have a group of people who you've already trusted in their thought, and vice versa. They trust in you, that you, number one, exactly what Siobahn said, you're not going to solve it overnight, but you are working towards solutions. You're brainstorming creatively for those solutions, and you're also championing your team. Your team need you, right? Whether it's just to talk about the weather, or to just lay out frustrations, or to have a positive day in the office. Please make sure that you're collectively thinking about mental health for your team, so that they can be in the trenches with you, for you, and ultimately for girls and women in STEAM.
Thank you. And Anita?
Thanks, Gabby. I have more than one idea, actually, so I'm just going to try and get through it fast. One is just building off of what Siobahn said is, we are problem solvers, right? Like that's what being a STEM professional is. And at some level, I urge us to approach this with curiosity rather than judgment. It's like, how do we approach this as people have different ideas from us? Why is that? And how can we come to a common understanding? Because at the end of the day, everybody wants good things for their kids. And that is an absolute given, and a philosophy that I think we can take for granted, that everybody wants good things for their kids. We might have slightly different ideas on how to get there, but that's where the curiosity and the exploration come in. How do we do this in ways that, at the end of the day, it has to serve the community that you sit in, right? Now, you can't impose something on someone who doesn't want it. The other thing is collect outcomes data and stories of impact of your programming. It's more important than ever to make the case for the importance of your programs. NSF right now is actually collecting stories of the impacts their grants have had on your community. And Amanda, I think if I shared a link with you, if you're able to start sharing that with NSF, if you have NSF grants, it'll help, right? The messenger is as or more important than ever, right? Like, don't assume you are the correct messenger for this time. It might be a parent, it might be a community member, and it's always young people. Youth Voice Week is actually started today. It's an initiative that the After School Alliance runs. So support the young people in your programs to speak up about what the programs mean to them, and to fight for the things that they appreciate about your program. Because, it's, as one of our CS partners says, democracy is a verb, right? Like, we all have to take action. Giving up is not an option. Sort of being still is not an option. And so let's start teaching young people how to ask for the things they want and care about. And the other thing I'll just say is that, a lot of the rules and regulations are still up in the air, right? So don't make massive changes unless you know you really have to. See who your local expert is on the laws and ask them for clarity before you make massive changes that you might then have to unchange a few months from now. And again, I'll end on this note of being an advocate. And, we have the After School Alliance has a lot of different toolkits and tips for you all, and take advantage of some of the strategies that have already been developed that can help you be an effective advocate and to sort of work with your community members. Women and girls make up half the population or more, as Gabby said, and have needs that cannot and should not be ignored. And we have to figure out how we can keep supporting them. That's our job, right? As advocates for women and people who run programs for women. So
Thank you,
I'll end there and turn it back to you.
Very good advice from all of our panelists, very wise. Again, we hope that this was good. I'll, myself end on that note that, necessity is sort of the cradle of innovation, right? Is sometimes these sorts of environments and challenges are what makes us rise, right, together and address them. And it really stimulates new ideas, new thoughts, new collaborations. Use these opportunities to strengthen your positions, your voices, your projects, your programs, your impact. So with that said, I'm going to hand this off back to Amanda and Karen for closing remarks.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists today for sharing your insights, your advice, your resources. And I also really want to thank everyone in the chat for bringing these amazing questions, these stories, these experiences. You really guided the discussion today, and I certainly learned a lot. I thought a lot. And so I really appreciate everything that you've brought. And it sounds like a lot of people, Gabby, are interested in a part 2, a continuation of the conversation in some way. So thank you all so much for being here. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Karen Peterson, our CEO, our leader here, the founder of the National Girls Collaborative Project. So the reason we're all here today, for any few closing remarks that you have, Karen.
Thanks, Amanda. And I think we're really learning today about the power of community, right? I expected to learn a lot from our panelists. And along with learning a lot, I feel positive from all the comments in the chat and having this community of support. So I want to thank our fabulous speakers. NGCP benefits greatly from your leadership, and thanks to Amanda and other NGCP staff for supporting this event. And for those of you who are attending this webinar live or watching it, we want to remember those that will be watching the recording on their own. NGCP is here to support all of you, and we are indeed facing tremendous challenges. We are tracking the changes, and we are dedicated to supporting our network in meeting their goals. When we started our work more than 20 years ago, under a Republican president, I will say, there were very few programs designed to use the strategies that we know engage girls and work for all youth in STEM. In fact, we didn't even call it STEM in those days. We called it something else. And in that time, we've experienced tremendous success. We've expanded the NGCP network. We've seen many new programs develop and increased use of high quality resources and research. And many of you on this call have developed and are using these resources. So this is an especially important National Women's History Month. And we encourage you to stay engaged with us. Please support us, collaborate with us. We've seen the power of collaboration and collaborate with each other, and help us represent you by staying connected to NGCP. So thank you all so much. I think we'll wrap it up a few minutes early. We'll give you some time back in your day and give you time to review all these great resources. And we will be sending out the recording and the chat and the PowerPoint. And great, if any panelists want to put their emails in the chat, I will put my email in the chat. We hope you have a great ending to National Women's History Month 2025. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, everybody.